Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome you here at Witte de With this afternoon. My name is Yoeri Meessen. I'm responsible for the education here at Witte de With. And we welcome you here for an afternoon organized by the students of the Willem de Kooning Academy. As such, I have very little to say. Which is exceptional. And the students, but first their teacher will introduce the afternoon. I wish you a lot of listening pleasure and learning this afternoon. Thank you.
Welcome to Collapsology. I read a quote this afternoon or this morning. It says, "It is easier to imagine the end of the world than to imagine the end of capitalism." This is a famous quote by Frederick Jameson, and Slavoj Žižek is quoting it every time when he can, so I'll do it for him today. Welcome to this symposium on behalf of Witte de With and the fourth year students of the minor Critical Studies, part of the autonomous practices of the Willem de Kooning Academy. We are very happy to have you here. We have a thrilling program about some urgent questions regarding the present future. We, around 20 students, Yoeri Meessen and Dokus van der Made, also in collaboration initially with Florian Kramer from Research Center, Rotterdam 010. And me, Esma, Moukhtar, their teacher of critical theory within the minor. We prepared and organized this symposium to investigate a couple of ideas and views on how to go on with the world and ourselves in an era of economic crisis and ecological crisis, doom scenarios, and many more apocalyptic predictions to come. What if capitalism, as we know it, goes on? What if it collapses? And then what? Should we try to escape it? Can we imagine a way out of the current circumstances? And how did we get here anyway? In advance of this symposium, during the last months, we have spoken about old school critical theory, like the Frankfurt School and so on. And in this very room, we had 4 read-in sessions. We read and spoke about 4 particular texts that came out of a long selection procedure. Texts that we have spoken about were the Communist Manifesto by Marx and Engels, The Tears of Eros by Georges Bataille. We read the introduction of 1,000 Plateaus, the text Rhizome by Deleuze and Guattari, and the more recent Manifesto for an Accelerationist Politics by Nick Schnizek and Alex Williams, which is a quite critical response also to more earlier concepts of acceleration. So the whole idea of capitalism and collapse, or the end of the world, and so on, from there we try to develop ideas for this symposium, and I think we did succeed. What to do, for instance, with the old opposition, that's also what we talked about, between communism and capitalism. Does this dualism make sense? I read a quote, and I will read it. It starts here. "Communism, in theory, is an egalitarian utopia. Actually existing, communism meant ecological devastation, government spying on us, crappy cars, and gulags. Capitalism, in theory, is rocket ships, nanomedicine, and Bono saving Africa. But actually existing capitalism means Walmart, jobs, McMansions, people living in the sewers under Las Vegas, plus ecological devastation, government spying on us, crappy public transportation, and for-profit prisons." This is a quote by Benjamin Bratton. So should we be pessimistic because of what we know now? Can we still be optimistic about what we, with radical ideas and technology, can do about it now or soon, beyond the old. Veronica, can you come over? She will introduce to you, she's one of the students of the group, she will introduce to you our brilliant guests who let us know what they think about all this.
Thank you, Esma. I'm Veronica, and together with my fellow colleagues, I will introduce the guests. I want to have your attention to go through the names. Henk Oosterling, Daan Paans, Lieven de Cauter, Thijs, Witty. And after each presentation of our guests, the audience will have the opportunity to respond. And if you have a primary question, feel free to ask. So we'll start with Mr. Oosterling, who has been for about 30 years the Associate Professor of Philosophy of the Erasmus University Rotterdam, Director of Foundation Rotterdam Skill City, and he is also the founder of Rotterdam Vakmanstad. And well, the foundation is aiming for active and applicable developments in education by using new methods and applying these to various classes, various locations of Rotterdam. And he's also the author of many books, such as Radical Mediocrity, On the Border, Hollandia's Hypocritical Theater, and many other. And basically, what he will present today to us is the contours of collapsological awareness, and you can find more details in the handouts which have been presented to the audience. And he will be connecting the notions of revolution, abundance, transgression, rhizome, and acceleration as crucial aspects of an eco-relational politics. Well, he will briefly sketch the transition from a radical mediocrity to what he, following Arendt and the French philosophers of difference, labels and the inner core of our uncritical radical mediocrity, interest. Well, please welcome him, and he will present and elaborate on the subjects that Esma just mentioned about. Henk Oosterling.
Thank you, Veronica. I have half an hour and a lot to say, so it's up-tempo, and I've got a lot of images, so if you are tired of listening, you can look at the images. This can't be the first one. Right, that's the first one. Okay. So we're talking about collapsology, which the etymology of the word gives you the science, logy, of falling, lapsus, together. Collapsology. So don't kid yourself. We're going to the drain together, right? So I'm talking about the effort to think and act together. That's what collapsology says. So this is about what are we going to do together if we don't want the world to collapse. As simple as that. So what I'm trying to sketch are the contours, the criteria, the specific items and issues that are really matter once you think about the urgency of changing our politics and the urgency of, on whatever level, I'm going to elaborate on that later on whatever level, changing our lives. It's as simple as that. When you leave the room, you have to change your life. If you don't change your life, you haven't understood what I'm saying. Or you have already changed your life, of course. That's one way for an escape. So this is when it started. It started in 1972 with the report Limits to Growth, right? I awoken ecologically in 1967. That's a long time ago. And that was, perhaps some of you still know, that the Torrey Canyon, an oil tanker, broke down on the coast of Brittany, of Bretagne, and there was a big oil spill. And I was interested in birds. I had a stuffed bird at home, so I was really interested in birds. But I suddenly became aware of the fact that this oil spill destroyed everything that I liked. Birds, the beach. So that was the moment that I realized, and then I started to read Rachel Carson, Silent Spring. I was 15 years old, 16 years old. And then suddenly it started. And now I read, so 49 years later, I read this book of two French guys, Servigne and Stevens, Comment tout peut s'effondrer. How everything can collapse, right? When you read this, and you don't have the knowledge that I have acquired for 49 years, there are 3 scenarios after reading this. 1, before killing yourself, you shoot your children. Right? Second is, you really start changing your life. The third is, you turn around and go on with the things that you've been doing. Okay? So this is real. This is real. And the intuition, so they gathered all the information we have and all the scenarios and all the algorithms and everything they use to make those scenarios. What is going to happen within 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, right? And it is a terrifying book. So Collapsology, which is coined in this book, is not as much the terrifying idea that we're going down the drain. Collapsology is the plea to accept the urgency of the moment. That's what collapsology is about. So let's think from that perspective. Limits to growth, right? So, and then Brundtland came in 1987. And Brundtland said, we have to give our children the opportunity to take what we have gained and to grow, right? So this was the first idea where economic growth, environmental protection, and social equality came together, because sustainability always is accompanied by rightness and justness, right? So it's not disconnected. So economic injustice and ecological sustainability are paired, always. So let me give you an impression, just an impression. This is okay, but this was 1800, right? Just to give you an impression. These are the different parameters. I'm not going into detail because I've got half an hour. This is what has happened, right? This is the situation we're in now. Most of the ecosystems are down the drain. As simple as that. So this is a given fact. Right? We can look at what really matters. For instance, what we not really understand till a few years ago is that those cows really are the problem, you know. The farting and the shit of the cows are really the problem. A bigger pollution and a bigger emission than most of the cars. So eating meat is a problem. So when you eat meat, you're part of the problem. If you don't eat meat, you're part of the solution. So I want to go this whole spectrum from this macro-political to the micro-political. And the micro-political is simple. It's you standing in a supermarket deciding whether you buy this or that. That's where awareness starts. Awareness does not start somewhere over there with demonstration, whatever. Awareness starts the moment you open up your eyes and choose to eat this or that. Simple as that. So you're either part of the problem or part of the solution. There's no way out. So we understood that the whole ecosystem is a network. It's not a pyramid. So once one what really deteriorates is not a animal, but a relation. Relations deteriorate. So the moment something goes down the drain, already 2 or 3 other relations have gone down the drain. So researching relations is more important than just looking after animals. And I'm going to talk about relations, only about relations. This is what the students have been read. I'm not going to give you an explanation on this, but what I want to show with this, so the first one is this Williams and Schrinjek. How do you say it? Schrinjek? You don't know either. Okay, Schrinjek. All right. So this Accelerate Manifesto for the Accelerationist Politics, they give a few proposals. I'm coming back to that later. And then you have read those 3 texts: Marx and Engels, Georges Bataille, and Deleuze-Guattari. These are the elements in these texts. I'm not going to explain, but what I want to show with this, and I'll give it to you later to the students, so you can think about it later. But these are all analysis on different levels, different methodologies. So pairing those different proposals to change life is not that easy. The methodology of Marx and Engels is macro-political level, revolution, world revolution. Okay, great. The level of Georges Bataille is on a mesopolitical level, groups of people acting out excessive behavior in eroticism and in art, giving into an urge of transcending life, which is mesopolitical. It's carnival, right? It's a ritual. Deleuze-Guattari, they analyze the way our desires are produced by economy and how we connect with our desires to the world, which is on a micro-political level. It's about our forces, our affects, right? So once you compare them, you have to understand then that they are in a way complementary, but that the methodologies that they use to describe what they are analyzing is completely different. So it's not that easy to show that, well, you take this and you take that and you take that, and then we make a short bricolage and then we can do something. It's far more important. So the manifesto up there and the book that I mentioned, just How All Can Collapse, in between those 3 texts, it's an interesting exercise just to find out how it fits together. So what I found out is reading this manifesto of the Accelerationists, it's a hard word. It's a bit of Zizek, it's a bit of Leninism. They want an avant-garde to lead the troops. They have this idea of small groups, elites of intellectuals that are going to use technology in a different way. So it is a bit Marxist, but mostly Leninist, right? So, and they propose that we need a new intellectual infrastructure to use technology in a different way. That we have to reassess our attitude to media, which I'm completely in sync with them. So, and they say we have to reconstitute various forms of class power. These are the 3 proposals that they do, right? This is quite problematic, but I'll come back to that later, and we can discuss about it later. But that's what they propose. What's my proposal? So it's technology, stupid, not nature. Oh, not nature, that's nice. Not mature, well, okay. So not nature. So what they... It's a verschrijving, not a verspreking. Huh? Verschrijving? Yeah, okay, typo, yes. So they say the accelerationists left must become literate in these technical fields. Interesting. What they propose is a different literacy. A technological literacy. That's very important. I agree on that. Timothy Morton has shown us that what we need is ecology without nature. And I agree on that as well. Zizek agrees on that as well. What he means is that when we talk about nature, it's a 19th century romantic notion that we use, which have never had any connection with reality. It's just a notion in our mind, right? So we should think about ecology via technology. The real problems that we have in ecology are problems that we have caused by implementing technology. And nature is not the issue. Nature doesn't bother, you know. When we're all dead, nature goes on. No problem at all. So don't bother about nature. Think about technology, because that's what we invented and what we implemented. So our attitude towards technology should change in order to tackle ecological problems. It's a completely different approach. And so eventually we have to change our lives. That's what I coined as Dasein is design. For artists, this is very important. I'll come back to that later as well. So beyond techno-utopia, they want to reach beyond techno-utopia, right? So it's not technology as an end, but as a means. So they are no technophobic, right? We have to use technology. The main idea, the first idea, is that we have to become literate in a different way. We need media literacy. And media for me means everything that is technological. An iPhone is media, but a car is a medium as well. A pacemaker is a medium, right? A plofkip is a medium. It's not an animal, a plofkip. It's a technology. We have to reassess the technological aspect and not the animal aspect. So we need media literacy. That's the first thing. So there's a turning of paradigms. In our minds, for our visuals are predisposed by the way we look at the world, and the way we perceive the world is predetermined by visuals that we have in our minds. When we look at something, we immediately see how things connect because we have a visual, right? And the visual that we use is a pyramid. Simple as that. Bottom up, top down. Oh no, we're not going to do it top down, we're going to do it bottom up. And then we look as if we say something completely different. But it's exactly the same paradigm. What we need is a different paradigm. And the paradigm that we need, we already use it, but you don't understand it, is the paradigm of the network. Simple. We are connected, not top down. We are connected in a cyclical feedback way via networks. So there's no vertical, no horizontal, there's what Deleuze and Guattari say, a transversal relation to everything in a feedback loop. Not up and down, but up and down. So up and down are functions of a circle, which is a completely different visual when you use it. A completely different way of looking at how things connect together. So that's what Deleuze and Guattari proposed, rhizomes, instead of trees. So man in this visual is a node in a network. We are not disconnected from the whole. We are participating in society as a node in a network. We are determined by the way that we are linked to other nodes. Not linked to God or linked to nature, but to other nodes, right? So thinking like this means that the primary issue for philosophy is a relation and not an identity. So you have to develop a relational philosophy and specify this relational philosophy as an eco-relational philosophy. When I give this lecture to other groups like CEOs or governmental civil servants, the first question that I pose is, who is cloned? Whom of you is cloned? No one. So that means that you are the result of a relation, right? And the only thing that you do is try to get away from the relation. We call this individualization. And the moment we are free, what are we going to do? Start a relation. Do it all again. So relation is primary. If you don't have a relation, there's a big problem. And of course, I'm not talking about men, women, or whatever. I'm talking about being embedded as a node in networks with all kinds of relations. To all sides, not vertical and horizontal, but transversal to all sides. On all levels, it doesn't matter. And since we are digitally connected all over the world, it can be at the other end of the world as well, because the other end of the world is only halfway to yourself. Once again. The other end of the world is only halfway to yourself. So when you think in circles, you're always connected with yourself. That's an interesting issue. But I don't mean it in a narcissistic way, I mean it in a relational way. You relate to yourself via the other. The other is determined for the way you relate to yourself. Relating to yourself on a philosophical level means that's the primary feedback loop that we have. Self-reflection is the feedback loop that we have with ourselves. So you have to think in feedback loops, in circles. And once you think in circles and feedback loops, the world changes completely. So the citizen is a node in a network, right? I don't speak about individuals, I speak about individuals. Right? We are people in between people, always. In Buddhism, this is normal. Thich Nhat Hanh speaks about the Vietnamese Buddhists in France. He talks about people like interbeings. Pieter Sloterdijk talks about zwischenwezen. Jean-Luc Nancy talks about être en commun. It's an issue for the last 30 years. And we still think in 19th century individual terms of identity. Nowadays, on the higher academic education, there's a new buzzword, Bildung. Yeah, Bildung, great. An 18th century word for a 21st century problem. Okay, so we are individuals. If we want to act in an eco-relational way, we have to be aware of the fact that we are individuals. There is only one decision that we can make in this world. Not a decision to be connected or engaged. Nonsense. We are connected every moment. We are engaged every moment. The real decision is not wanting to be connected. And that's your last decision. So, it's not a matter of, I want to be connected. You are connected. That's the basic ontological fact. You are connected. So the moment you disconnect, something happens. And individualization is the structural way of disconnecting in order to connect. But we always think that disconnecting is the main issue. And we call this critical autonomy. Artists, 19th century artists, define themselves by critical autonomy. Artists have a problem in the 21st century. Artists are gone. The real artist nowadays is the designer. Because the designer connects. Autonomy on the Willem de Kooning Academy nowadays means multimedia. Is that so? No. No? Okay, we're going to talk later on, I think. So, but this technology is ambiguous. The technopathia, as I call it, is ambiguous because it connects us, but at the same time it defines our desire and it controls us. We pay with plastic, we travel with plastic, and everything is at the provider and can be checked. So it's an ambiguous connection. It's an ambiguous technopathia. We have to go from the ego to the eco. As simple as that. And I call this medial enlightenment. So we need a new enlightenment. Not the enlightenment of the ratio, of the vernunft, of the reason, but of the medium, of the connection, of the relation. That's the next enlightenment that we have to perform. Whether we have time enough, that's another issue. So, on what levels can we, because I have another 10 minutes, I think. Yeah? I started at 10 past. Yeah. So, how can we become active? What is activism once you take into account these, I call them collapsological reflections. And I write reflections with an A, not with an E. Because for me, thinking and doing is exactly the same. Right? So reflection with an A. So cradle to cradle is one way, but cradle to cradle is corporate. Cradle to cradle is a pyramid. Cradle to cradle is macro-political on that level. So this is one way to connect on a macro-political level. But there are at least 3 levels: macro-political, meso-political, and micro-political. And they're all connected They're all connected. So on a mesopolitical level, we have introduced in Rotterdam, we have proposed in 2004, I proposed, well, the city council asked me to give an analysis of the situations in Rotterdam, which was quite hard because Fortuyn was killed. It was just before Van Gogh was killed. So, and the Moroccan guys, they were really the target. So I gave an analysis of Rotterdam, how it changed over the years, and I proposed a few strategies to counter the problem. And one of the strategies was reintroduce a new 21st century craftsmanship, reintroduce this in the school curricula and raise kids in a more integral way in order for them to become eco-literate and media literate. As a result of which, the jobs that we have nowadays in Rotterdam, in the harbor, which is always ICT, so operators, but also in the care business, so they are more equipped for this new world. But the main issue is ecoliteracy, because they are the ones that have to perform in a cyclical economy. And we have to realize a cyclical economy. If you realize that within 4 years, in 2020, when you want to build something for governmental organizations, you need to build climate-proof, energy-neutral, right? So, and they call it an aanbesteding, I don't know what the English word is, but there's a contest, and then you get it once you've got a lot of parameters embedded in your proposal. And one of those parameters is eco-neutral. So all those building corporations, all those big project developers, they need to have guys and girls that can work in this eco-literate way. That is within 4 years. When you go to the MBO, the middle educational, vocational education, they don't learn it. So who is going to do it in 2020? I don't know. So it means that we are not yet taking the consequences of what we are already laid down at 2020. So that's what triggered us to make this intervention. I'll show you the intervention. This intervention is on a mesopolitical level. So the macro-political level, of course, takes big interventions, which have been spoken about in Paris in December 2015, right? The planes were left out. Once again, the planes were left out. I don't think they really talked about shitting and farting cows. So there's really an issue. But this is on a mesopolitical level. And with mesopolitical, I mean groups that organize themselves and start from out of nowhere injecting into the system new interventions. I think someone as Isabel Stengers has written about all those specific mesopolitical interventions. So what do we do? Well, I don't give you it takes too much time, but so there's 21st century skills. On a macro-political level, the United Nations and UNESCO have defined our skills like this for the future, right? You see, digital literacy is there, right? Environmental awareness is there. We call it eco-wijsheid and media-wijsheid. I'm a philosopher, so we transformed philosophy into ecosophy, and ecosophy implies media literacy and eco-literacy. That's what we teach at the schools. Now, on a daily basis, we teach 1,600 children with this program. So, and through the whole column, the educational column, from primary schools to preparatory middle vocational education and middle vocational education. So VMBO, MBO. And the higher vocational education, HBO, gives us trainees that work in our schools. So this is ecoliteracy. So ecoliteracy has a mental aspect as well. It is a social aspect, there's a physical aspect. So we redefined the idea of sustainability. most of the time people think about sustainability in physical terms. The environment, that's about it, you know. And then, well, there are some measures that you can take in order not to pollute too much, or you take back your emissions. But that's only one part of sustainability. Sustainability has at least, right, so, yes, what is happening? Okay, so it's on 3 levels: physical, social, and mental. I think you can only change things if you intervene on those 3 levels. Right? People have to feel how it works. They have to cooperate to change the practice and find new practices in order to train. And they have to change their minds as well and their visuals in perceiving the world. But now technology got me by the tail, I think. So we have a 3-fold sustainability idea as well: physical sustainability, social sustainability, and mental sustainability. Yep. So in school, we teach children an eco-social circle. In school, all the children, that means from group 1 to group 8, they get 6 new cycli of lessons. So the first one is they all train at school judo and aikido from the 1st to the 8th class. Then they learn to cook at school and prepare meals. They garden and get biology. Then, right, so you can see here. So they garden and take care of the garden, and they cook. And we took another 2 cycli of lessons as well. Technique. So from the 1st class to the 8th class, kids are trained in technological and techniques. We cooperate with Lego. Lego has a fantastic curriculum from Duplo via Lego to sensors to computers. And in group 8, they can make their own programs and have things run, right? So in this way, they learn to handle technology in a different way. And they learn that all those different aspects of eating, moving, or your moving patterns and your eat patterns, the way you cook your food, the way you take care of your food or grow your own food, this is a circle. So these children are more or less forced to answer questions like, where does the food come from? What is the footprint? And food with a D, not with a T, footprint. So, what is your place within this ecosystem? That's why we transformed philosophy. They all get philosophy, and the last 3 grades get ecosophy. And ecosophy is philosophy, peace lessons, and eco lessons. And they learn how all those things that they have done in the other lessons, how it is on a higher scale connected to other activities. So this is the way we want to raise them up to the 8th grade in ecoliteracy and media literacy. We had gardens, we constructed gardens with photovoltaic cells. We had warehouses, a few smaller gardens, didactic gardens in the 4 neighborhoods of Rotterdam, the south of Rotterdam. So this is the 3-fold idea of sustainability. So physical, environmental, yes, 2 more minutes. So this physical means not only the environment, but also your body. Because simply said, if you eat a hamburger, the hamburger is raised on the Pampas in Brazil or Argentina. They cut down the rainforest, right? Your body becomes obese. You can't concentrate yourself. So your obeseness is connected to the Pampas in Brazil. It's a long way, but it's only halfway back to yourself. Right? Remember, it's always halfway back to yourself. So these children are taught those bigger ecosystems and the smaller ecosystems in the garden. There's a lot of participation of MBO students and of parents. Right? We take care of 67,000 lunches a year. We prepare them, 67,000 lunches a year. They eat at school 4 days in the week. And then we take it up to the VMBO. And then we have the, as we call it, the vakhuis, where they, like the old community center in the early days that has been privatized, so they can go after school to the vakhuis. And then on MBO they go to the vakwerf, and that's the story is not important now. What I wanted to show is that this all is possible within the curricula of the schools. So this is a meso-political intervention. My last question is, what is a micro-political intervention? And the micro-political intervention is my decision to change my way of desiring, my way of defining my primary needs, and that's in a way connected to capitalism. And that's where another story starts, and that's where the macro-political level comes back. So also this circle closes the moment when I'm in a supermarket in front of something of which I wonder, will I buy it or not? The circle is closed. That's where it happens, the ecological awareness. So when you collapse in the supermarket, the system will collapse. Okay, thanks. Do you want to do questions now? Do you want to do questions now, a few? Or?
If you don't mind.
Yeah, I don't mind.
Thank you, Mr. Oosterling. I'm sure we're all still processing what was told. But yeah, here we go. Raise your hand if you want to respond, and I'll walk to you with the microphone.
There's at least one gentleman that has an objection.
You were waiting.
Yeah. If you're talking in the end of micropolitics versus macropolitics, aren't you repeating your own, what you criticize yourself, namely bottom-up versus a top-down approach? Isn't micropolitics just another word for bottom-up?
No. No, this is all exactly what I try to explain with the circle. So bottom-up and top-down does not disappear. It's a fixation of a cyclical process. Yes? A fixation of a cyclical process. So for instance, every process needs a strategic consideration. It needs tactical cooperation. It needs an operational focus. The operational focus is bottom, right? As we say in the pyramidal visual. And the strategic consideration is top. But this strategic consideration now has to be part of your way of shopping, for instance. Can I buy this? Do I want to buy this? So it's not bottom up. The top down is there at the very moment you make the choice, because it connects to macro-political problems like too much meat or less rainforests. So it's a different approach and a different awareness. When you're bottom up, when you only think bottom up, you think, well, I'm at the bottom and I want to go to the top, which is a completely different approach, right? So it's still there, the pyramid, but it's a fixation of a movement of the circle.
Thank you.
Is that an answer? No. We can come back afterwards when everything is.
Thank you very much for your interesting talk. I can sympathize greatly with the analysis you give of the different levels of interconnected problems in this ecology and media literacy that's needed. I have a concern on an educational level, as an educator myself as well. How do you prevent producing skilled workers that will continue the system we have? Because you, in some ways, you seem to be equipping people, as you said, to be able to deal with this complex world we're living in. How do you, challenge people in the educational structure to break out of the paradigm they're growing in?
Yeah, that's what I told my colleague before when I came here. That will be a question.
Bingo.
Because, yeah, that's a good question. Because when you look at it from a very strict angle, I'm drilling and skilling in order for those guys and girls to participate in a flexible economy, right? And they don't change the system, right? So that means that this is only one strategy. So it's not either or. I think we have to change the educational system from within, and at the same time have all those macro and meso-political strategies as well to change the system from a different direction.
And how about that? You mean revolution?
Well, yeah, it's hard to pronounce the words, because do you know what you say when you say revolution? I'm going to chop your head off, I'm going to kill you when you are not in agreement with me. So is that your revolution? Or are we going to sit down and say, well, we're not going to participate any longer? Is that revolution? So what's revolution? That's Bataille, you know, the revolt of Bataille. And the revolution of Marx and Engels. Connected to Deleuze and Guattari is quite a thing. So I don't know whether it's revolution. I think revolution is a word, an outdated word. Like apocalypse is an outdated word. We're all beyond the apocalypse. We're post-apocalyptic, like Timothy Morton says, and I agree with him. We are post-apocalyptic. Read the book. Read the book. We're in this world. We are post-apocalyptic. And that's even worse because we think we are not yet near the apocalypse. So the real revolution is something that has a completely different quality than the earlier revolutions in America, in France, in Belgium, wherever. And we are not the only ones that revolt nowadays. There are ecosystems that revolt, right? There are animals, other beings that revolt in a different way. So revolution is a completely different word nowadays. But I think we have to, it's not, that's what the Accelerationists Manifesto says, we shouldn't do this. Nonsense. When you read Deleuze and Guattari well, it is not either or, it's and. So my strategy is part of a whole scala, a whole spectrum of strategies. And the whole thing is, how are they going to join together or fit together? And there's not a top-down master that can strategically lead this process. So the Leninist issue is not my issue. So I don't agree with Zizek that we can do this. It will be in the interrelatedness, in the interconnectedness, the open communication, and the way to participate on an ecological awareness that we can connect in a completely different way. But I'm not trying to drill kids to work as a ZZP for a guy that just exploits them in a different way.
Thank you. We're running out of time, so if there is one last remark or opinion.
There's nobody else? Students? I was just wondering, the first part of your story with the networks, etc., it really reminded me of what biosemiotics biosemiotics are saying about, like Wendy Wheeler, for instance, in The Whole Creature, about that basically nature and culture, you can't distinguish them anymore. It's one thing. But then later on in your story, you're distinguishing them more specifically. Why are you doing that? Like the eco and the tech.
No, I said ecology is technology.
Yes, but in, for instance, the school system, it seems like you're kind of sort of trying to. Is that only a practical thing, or
it's a didactical thing?
A didactical thing.
Yes, it's of course an integral intervention,
Mm-hmm.
but we still have all those things that we have to take care of in order for the CITO and the analytical way that we work in the education system.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to divide it. But in ecosophy, for instance, it is connected again, right? So they do the growing and they do the cooking and they do the sporting and so on, and the technique. And then in the philosophy and the ecosophy lessons, these things are connected together.
Yeah, so the tutors, they sort of put the glue in between. Right. So it's not a conscious separation of those things again.
No.
Right.
No, on the contrary.
Okay.
It has to be defined into each other all the time. But that's hard in one lesson. So we use ecosophy, so the ecology and the philosophy and the peace lessons to connect it together.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll move on to our second guest. And my fellow student, Anke Swinkels, will introduce him in details.
Next speaker I am proud to introduce to you is Daan Paans. He is a visual artist and documentary photographer, and in his work he investigates the concept of time and the human incapacity to control time, and we thought that would fit perfectly into the subject of collapsology. And besides that, being visual artists ourselves, we are also very curious to hear how he incorporates these kinds of subjects into his visual work and how he combines his research with his photography. So I'd like to welcome Daan Paans.
Thank you kindly for having me. Well, I'm a visual artist and I almost don't dare to say that anymore after the last reading. I'm not a designer. In this lecture I'm going to tell you a bit more about two projects I made which have, I think, a certain connection with the theme of collapsology. But first I'm going to tell you a bit more about my working methods, because I'm always trying to research for several case studies that all sort of float around this theme of the domestication of time and time span, but also the domestication of fate. And these case studies all react to this theme from a different time span. And this is after a quote by St. Augustine. He claims that there are always 3 times in the present. So a present time of the past, a present time of the present, and a present time of the future. And these 3 times always work together to have our perspective of the world. And that's also the way I'd like to view things, and that's the way I try to connect several stories to have a new view on a subject. And this resulted in several projects, which I'm going to present you 2 of now. And the first one is about how humanity tries to search for a certain way of immortality or an indefinite lifespan, and how we try to archive this by using technology and biology. And the second topic that I'm going to tell you a bit more about is the way that depictions of past events or future events that humanity haven't witnessed, how we depict those events and how they actually color our collective memory and how they change our perspective of the world in the here and now. But I'm starting with the project Letters from Utopia, which is this publication over here. And it consists 5 different case studies. And they all took place after Darwin came with his claim of with the origin of species, where he was certainly an iconoclast for the concept of an afterlife in the Christian concept. And this was the starting point of my idea, and I came into the cross correspondences, which you see an example of here on the screen. This event happened in the 19th century, where Darwin just came with this claim, and people actually tried to use science in a way to reveal or to escape something that science claimed. So they believed that the human spirit do survive after bodily death, but not in heaven or hell of whatsoever, but in a parallel world. So they sort of claim that they lived among us, and they had, for 30 years long, they organized seances where they believed to be in touch with the spirits. And in the same time, they believed that there was a certain collapse coming for the society then. And they believed that their escape would be this parallel world. And this ended up in the symbolism you see on these pictures here. And for me, this also represents a certain human incapacity to understand this idea or to claim this idea. And the second case study, we got more into our technocratic society of nowadays. I had a peek into the personal documents of FM's Venn diary, and he renamed himself later as FM 2030 because he believed that in 2030 humanity would be immortal, and he claimed that by a sort of transhumanist thought. So he believed that by merging technology and the human body, we will sort of become an Ubermensch. And it's kind of interesting because these ideas are all from the 1970s. And I think he was pretty well ahead of the times because, for example, on this sketching of him, you see, for example, a life belt which constantly monitors our body, which is pretty much the case in the here and now. Or for example, this one where he claims that we can transplant all our organs with artificial body parts, which reminds me, for example, of the Bio 3D printer where we can print virtually every organ and implant it in our bodies. And that makes me come to the third case study of the book, which is about cryonics. The concept of cryonics is the freezing of the human body straight after bodily death. And the people who actually sign up for this believe that science will become that far that they will be revived in the future. And I went to the Cryonics Institute, which you can see on this picture. And at the moment there are about 110 people stored in these stats that you see here, and you sort of hang upside down, and there's liquid nitrogen in there. So, and pretty much reminds me of sort of 70s sci-fi, the place, which I found rather interesting. And I also interviewed a few people who signed up for cryonics, and I asked them about their future perspectives. And what I found interesting was that they were so, there was sort of utopian future thinking in their ideas. And I selected some sound pieces of the interviews, which gives an idea of it. And this should work right now.
I think it's likely that it's going to succeed to be able to bring people back. When you have an extended lifespan, you could do a whole lot more. You could do more study. You could do more travel. You could maybe go out to the stars. That could be a chef as well as maybe being an airplane pilot. The other thing is that a lot of times people now are very, very greedy. They don't take the time to help out other people. And I'm hoping that if you had a longer life, and it's not like you only have 40 years and you've got to do all this stuff, then maybe people will be nicer to each other.
But at some point they have immortality. And that's what I expect. I expect that death awaits us all. In my view, man technologically will conquer death in 150, 200 years. Technology will get to the point. Man's science extends exponentially. So at one point, maybe even when Earth is now just used as a recreational plot, and we have other galaxies and other planets that we would inhabit and live and extend life. Who knows what awaits in the future? What may be odd is that in 200 years we're certainly going to look differently than the way we look now. No question about that. Because as technology accentuates, form follows function. Okay, we'll be using less muscle mass. Okay, we're going to be lifting things. Robots will be doing it. All the manual labor, even finite tasks like operating on hearts, which will also occur. So as a result of that, our muscles are going to atrophy. Our heads are going to get larger. Our eyes will become more luminous. Our fingers are going to be long because dexterity. We'll probably be taller.
I truly believe in it. And in my case, I've enjoyed my life. I've had a wonderful life. And I want more of it. And there's a possibility, it appears, that if they do revive us, and there's no guarantee, and we know that, but if they do, the good news is that we will come back in approximately, at the very latest, 35-year-old bodies. They'll do reverse, like they're starting to do now, or trying to, with live people. You know, slowing down of aging and stopping it. You know, you gain 20 years for every year. You know, so that's what I'm anticipating. I'm just anticipating that they can revive me.
And from my own simple analysis is that this damn world is going to be too overcrowded in about 40 or 50 years for anybody to be wanting to stay on the earth. So I'm hoping that, you know, we'll have, by that time, we'll have had many industrialists opening places for people to live off the earth. The development of revival techniques will be oriented toward making people capable of doing whatever makes them happy. So by the time we're revived, if we want to be super mathematicians, they should be able to give us the training and the mental changes necessary, even mechanical adaptations necessary to be able to do that.